Roll Tide, everybody. Welcome to Cover Crimson. This is where we get together on Monday. We watch the coaches' press conference and look at your comments, react with you guys, and we'll talk Alabama football. Bama, 34-0 win on Saturday, off this week. Then they go to Baton Rouge. Can the Crimson Tide make the college football playoff? And that's a big question right now. We'll get into that and more right here on Cover Crimson. All right, that's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie, and we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Show's always presented by mybookie.ag. Use the promo code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. Take advantage of that and be a part of Cover Crimson. And Clint, you were on there smashing that message board all up with just amazing stuff coming off of Alabama's win. And we'll hear from the coaches, but what did you learn about the game that you can pass on to the folks that are hanging out with us?
Yeah, so far, and we'll be doing the snap count observations over at covercrimson.com, but just things that I've kind of noticed. Justice Haynes, like I talked about yesterday, looked incredible. I mean, just the vision, the footwork to be able to do some of the things that he was able to do. I kind of talked about, some of the issues Alabama had, like Missouri was kind of having their nose who was lined up in like a 1 or a 2-eye, whether he's between the guard and the center. He would be jumping from the backside A to the play side A lot. You saw that happening on multiple occasions, and it just kind of threw off some of the counter stuff that Alabama was doing because, the center would have to work up to the second level rather than the guard, and that would kind of allow the linebacker to be able to get over the top because it was a really tough block for Parker Brailsford to make. So a lot of the stuff out on the perimeter they were trying to do, there was reasons for it. Missouri had a good game plan. They were doing some different things, but overall, I thought the run game looked very much improved. I thought that, Jalen Milroe started to find his groove a little bit again, and I think that's huge for this offense and really this team in general. And then defensively so far, which, I kind of switched it up this week. I'm going offense first because defense, it's like you're going against a second and third string quarterback. You were going against a backup running back. You were going against, a wide receiver group that was without one of its starters. So I'll do that second. Very impressive on that side of the football. Don't get me wrong. Just, I don't think you could take as much away from it as maybe the other side. So good run game. Hopefully Alabama can build on some of this stuff because if they can, this offense is going to be tough to stop. There's playmakers all over the field.
A lot of people were talking about Milroe. Apparently he's not hurt. I felt like that could be one of the issues that he was having. It does make me a little more nervous. He obviously was in a slump because he looked terrible against Tennessee. I didn't think the first half of the game was very good, but I thought he did a better job in the second half. Started to rip off some passes, get the offense going, and I thought that opened up the run game. But I could be totally wrong about him being not healthy. He just hasn't looked right.
I mean, at this point, I'm going to go off of what he has said. It was weird to me, like Tyler Booker's answer last week, the fact that he made a point to kind of go back and say, well, I say he's 100%. Everybody's dealing with something. The fact that he specifically said that, the fact that DeBoer, talked about, some hinted at some stuff for different guys, and Milroe might be one of them. I understand where anybody could say based off of his on-field play and what he wasn't willing to do compared to what he was willing to do early in the season. I could totally understand where you would say, okay, is he hurt? You would make that question. But at this point, he's starting to come out of whatever funk he was in, whether it be mental or physical. And so I'll just take his word for it. He says it's not physical. I feel like that would be a pretty easy excuse. And instead of taking the easy excuse, he's admitting to people that he's healthy, or at least that's what he's telling people. So, I guess I'll take his word for it. But either way, Alabama's offense is starting to find his groove again. Missouri's defense has some problems. We knew that going in, but they were also, they limit the explosive plays, or at least they had until this game, really. They got some playmakers on that defense, and they got a good defensive coordinator. So I think you can take away a lot as far as Alabama's offense being able to get some things going.
Well, that's kind of what I'm looking forward to hearing. We'll hear from the coordinators, and then we'll hear from Coach DeBoer. The team's off this week. It'd be good for them to heal up. I mean, if Milroe's not injured, there's enough guys that could definitely use some time off. And this season's interesting because, Bama's 6-2. They still have a chance to make the college football playoff. They have the toughest game of the season coming up in Baton Rouge. It's a different feel because this wasn't really a big rivalry game in Alabama until Nick Saban took the job. That's when this became kind of a hate rivalry for them, and really it was just that, we stole their girlfriend. I mean, really, that they got the one championship. He set them up for 2 others, and then he won 6 at Alabama. They didn't like that. Well, I'm curious how this matchup with LSU is going to change with Coach DeBoer and Brian Kelly. And I think both of them are 2 of the best coaches in the country. These two teams are flawed. They both have 2 losses, but a win over the other one kind of puts them in position to kind of sneak into the playoff.
Well, it's like we were talking about yesterday a little bit. LSU's passing game in particular, like Nussmeier, he's going to turn the football over. He's got a gunslinger mentality. LSU fans aren't very happy with him right now. They feel like a lot of that loss to Texas A&M was on his shoulders.
Right.
But, having that gunslinger mentality, I mean, he can go out there and throw an interception or 2 and it doesn't bother him a bit. And so you got to keep capitalizing. If someone's willing to play that way, you're not going to get them rattled necessarily. And so the approach has to be, okay, you don't have to be rattled. We just need to keep taking advantage. When you make ill-advised throws, we capitalize to get some, more turnovers and all that stuff. But this passing game for LSU, while he does have, some issues as far as, turning the football over, he's also a really good quarterback, great ball placement, got some receivers in the passing game. So I would fully expect them at home to cause Alabama's defense some issues, way more issues than definitely Missouri with where they were at from an injury standpoint, and then also probably even Tennessee. I don't think they had the run game that Tennessee had, but I think the passing game, which is kind of more of an exploitable piece for Alabama's secondary. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out.
Well, I mean, one thing we saw was Bama's defense through all of this has just forced a lot of turnovers, and so not only have they been great in the first half of football games, but they also have found ways to get interceptions. I saw in the comments section on one of our other shows where somebody said, Alabama didn't win that as much as Pine won it for Alabama with the 3 interceptions, right? I mean, I'm sure some of you guys are going to laugh about that. I did, but they're right. I mean, he did throw a bunch of interceptions, but that defense has to go out there and get them.
They do, yeah. And they've done such a good job this year as far as generating turnovers. I mean, Vanderbilt, they don't force any, and they end up losing to a team that they probably shouldn't. Everybody knows Vanderbilt's a much better team at this point than I think they realized at the time, but Alabama was still a better team. But, Vanderbilt forced some turnovers. Alabama's defense didn't. That ended up playing a huge part. But in a lot of these SEC games, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Missouri, like it wasn't just that you were going against a bunch of backups, at key positions against Missouri's offense. You've done it against some really good offenses as well, or at least some very serviceable offenses. And so that's a key part of what they're really trying to build, in Tuscaloosa. There's still an emphasis. You want to limit the yards, you want to limit the points, you want to do all that stuff. But if you can do the turnovers and you got that down, you can really complement some things as far as what you're doing offensively. And I think that's a good approach in this new era of college football. I'm not saying that you can't have an elite defense that holds teams under 10 points. Like that's just impossible. But I will say it's as close to impossible as it possibly could be. And so if like that's your focus, it's like it's kind of it's not really achievable. So I think the way everybody plays defense is a little bit different now. And I think that Kane Womack got a pretty good feel for that. It's taken him some time to implement what he's going to be doing or the strengths that he wants to be for this Alabama defense. But we're seeing it slowly improve. So
do you think he was on the hot seat at all? And there were rumors that the Southern Miss job, which is open right now, has maybe at least Southern Miss might have some interest in him going there.
Here's what I would say. Why? If you're Kane Womack, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. You were at a similar spot at South Alabama. You were building something. You were well respected. The fans loved you. You took that jump because you weren't necessarily confident that really getting that big time job. It's like easier to go from coordinator at a big program like Alabama to a head coach in a major program than it is being a really good head coach at a smaller program and then making that jump to the SEC or the Big Ten or wherever. So I just think that if based off of his decision to step down from being a head coach at one of those types of jobs, why would he leave the very, after just 1 year to go do that somewhere else? I mean, I'm sure Southern Miss would probably have some interest in him. Certainly. I just don't know if he would do it.
Well, the other part too is unless he's being asked to leave, but the defense has played a lot better over this stretch than, kind of I felt like they were trending in the wrong direction. I'll put it like that. The third downs, the fact that they weren't stopping teams on third down really worried me. I mean, that Vanderbilt game was one of the worst defensive games I think I've ever seen Alabama play. I mean, and that's going back years, man. I mean, I don't remember a worse game for Alabama. When you allow a team 12 of 16 on third down, you're not just going to have a job very long. I mean, that's just the way it is. But he's come back and get a shutout. I mean, I know it's against a backup, but he's still got a shutout.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, there's vulnerabilities with this team that he's having to work around, like the youth in the secondary. I mean, Tennessee could have taken more advantage of that than they did. There were some opportunities in the first half. So Alabama's great first half performance wasn't just oh man, they had a great game plan, everybody was executing. It was some of Tennessee not taking advantage of some of their opportunities, but at the same time, I liked the game plan. I liked how they wanted to kind of manage Nico. He had some struggles, take advantage, turn the football over. I mean, they have to bring a backup in for one play and they throw an interception. That's kind of that's something that Alabama doesn't anticipate happening. But the other stuff, the other couple of turnovers that they got, it was guys making plays. But what I will say is that you see Alabama's defense moving in the right direction. And I think every single week, will the secondary continue to be an exploitable piece in some areas, in some certain, in certain situations? I think that it will. But I also will say that I feel like, it's in a position where you're seeing it move in the right direction. So hopefully it won't be as exploitable as we continue to move through.
What do you think about, we were kind of getting into some things and, as we wait for this press conference to start during this off week, what do you think about the Milroe leadership? I thought, look, I know some people were like, they're kind of, it's a mixed bag from fans on Milroe. I like him. You guys know that. I saw him giving a lot of high fives and congratulating and being supportive, not just of the offense, but the defense. I think that stuff's important. Some people feel like that's eyewash. I don't agree, man. I think that's part of being a good leader, and I like that about him. Did you notice any of that stuff? And where do you sit on that?
Well, I don't think his body language was great. And through a couple of those games, I mean, when they show him on the sidelines, I mean, and granted, there wasn't a whole lot to be excited about. So, I mean, I'm not saying he's got to be over there jumping around, having a blast while you're really struggling. But it just, he's kind of the guy that everybody turns to. He's the guy that even the leaders turn to because he's kind of the face of the program. The fact that he finished number 6 in the Heisman, he's a polarizing player. He's an exciting player, and he chose to come back to Alabama where really, a lot of people were pushing for him to enter their transfer portal and go elsewhere. He stuck with Alabama. He earned the respect of his teammates, much like a lot of his teammates did. He wasn't the only one, but it just, I will say, I feel like that he, right now is starting to come out of whatever funk that he's been in. And I think that's massive, whether it be, and you never know what somebody's going through. I mean, you really don't, but I think it took some things happening, breaking his way as far as, the turnover, one of the turnovers that Alabama had on Saturday, the offense got really good field position. They were actually able to capitalize on it. I kind of made a joke on Twitter, talking about how they actually took advantage of one of the opportunities they were given. But really, they started to build off of that and get some of the confidence back. And I really am encouraged. I think that was what had to happen entering the bye week, because now you've gotten some of your confidence back. You can go into this bye week knowing, hey, I mean, we can get this back on track and get it back on track relatively quickly. And I think that would be very important.
Well, Alabama plays LSU next time around. But if you were assessing this team right now and kind of looking and going, hey, where are we right now? Like what grade would you give? And I guess we're kind of through 2 of 3 semesters, right? We've got the final semester, which to me is the last 4 games. We're 8 games in, 6-2 record. Lost a tough one to Tennessee and the Vanderbilt game.
So what would
Professor Clint's grade be
for everybody?
Yeah, for the team. Yeah.
I would say right now you're looking at I would say a solid C. I'd say a 7.5. Because I think based off of, and it's really unfair. Like the expectations were set up by people like me, right? Where it's like you look at all the talent, you look at the coaching staff. I mean, there was just a lot to like. You think, okay, it's going to be a pretty smooth transition, but this isn't like other places where they got to replace a coach or whatever. Like Nick Saban had been at Alabama for a very long time, and just his handprint was on literally everything. I mean, all the way down to people that are cleaning the hallways and stuff. I mean, just he had a certain standard, and bringing someone in that really didn't. That's not their approach. I mean, everything was going to look different. But I will say, I think they've done a really good job of everything was going wrong the second half against Georgia, Vanderbilt, South Carolina. Didn't matter that it was a win. Fans still felt like it was a loss. You lose to Tennessee. Fans were in full-on panic mode and really look at FSU. Should they be a 1 or 2 win team right now? No, they really shouldn't. I'm not saying that they're great. I will say that they are way better than their record has shown, but things started to go wrong. It started last year when guys were opting out in the bowl game. I think that really set a standard for that program in general. But then after that, when things started spiraling early, they have not been able to get back on track. And something like that, not to that degree, but something like that could have happened to Alabama. And yet they're sitting at 6-2 right now. They just got a 34-0 victory over Missouri. They're still in the conversation for the college football playoff. So, I mean, you got to give the coaching staff a lot of credit for making sure that didn't happen. And you also got to give the team a lot of credit for, a lot of their problems, getting some of those corrected, holding guys accountable. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I like this grading here, Nate. Good job. C team, B+ coaching.
Would you agree with that?
Well, I'm not going to agree with it, but I do like that assessment. I feel like, I'm not happy with the leadership. I'm just not. The penalty at the end of the Vandy game, the penalty in the Tennessee game. That's stuff that you can't do. But and I also feel like. I feel like the Missouri game was like they were so banged up. I mean, like they're without their running back and their best and their quarterback, by the middle of the game or the end of the game, and the backup was terrible. I wasn't blown away by Alabama. I liked some of the runs that they had. I thought Milroe did a better job in the second half, but nothing about what's going on right now makes me comfortable going into the LSU game. I've been waiting on this team that we saw first half of Georgia to come back, and I just don't see that. So I guess at the beginning of the year, the over-under was 9.5, but now that I see what this team is and where they are and what they are they should be undefeated, man. I mean, like they shouldn't have gone in there and lost to Vandy. They played so bad in that game. And Vanderbilt's good. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from them, but I mean, the interception at the beginning of the game, just some of the way the blocking being so bad, the offensive line's been a disappointment. I'd say a C for the team, just because I think they have all the talent in the world to be undefeated right now. And the leadership hasn't been good. C+ though, close to a B. I just think they're playing below their potential. And coaching, it's the same thing. I mean, I think it's a C+. Like I like DeBoer a lot. I think he's a great guy. I don't want to see things turn into Florida State at all. And Florida State's a great example of how fast this can get away. And for those of you guys that weren't around back in the days where Alabama went from Gene Stallings to Mike DuBose, it happened then. I saw it. I was there for it. And the Bob Bachroth, who was the athletic director, didn't appreciate what winning looked like, and then all of a sudden they tore it down, and we were bad for a long time. I mean, and it went away that fast. So I appreciate DeBoer. I just hope that there's some discipline. Well, I saw him get on. Was it Proctor? He was on the sideline a little bit.
It was Rott Montgomery.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's actually Joey Williams brought that up. and we haven't addressed that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, bring that up.
Well, I mean, a lot of people, it was the fact that Rock wasn't looking him in the eye. And I don't think we're getting a press conference, by the way, Mick. I think that he's doing the Monday morning quarterback today. But as far as Rock Montgomery, I feel like that some guys are just disciplined different, whether it be in high school and everything else. It might not be a lack of respect for Kalen DeBoer. It might just be that's kind of when someone's getting screamed at, people react differently. And some people, when they're disappointing somebody, they have a hard time looking them in the eye. It's not really a lack of respect. So, I mean, that could be it. I'm not saying that it's not, but I just think that you need to give, I think the bigger takeaway there is the fact that Kalen DeBoer was willing to jump on somebody, hold them accountable kind of publicly. Other players see that, and they know that he's capable of doing that with them as well. So, I mean, we'll kind of have to wait and see how that ends up playing out. But what I will say is speaking of player accountability, you did have the situation yesterday with the Seattle Seahawks where you had Jarron Reed, a former Alabama player, getting into a scuffle with his own teammate, Derek Hall, a former Auburn player, because Derek Hall did kind of a dirty, cheap shot. It got the Seahawks a 15-yard penalty, and Jarron Reed wasn't about it. And so he confronted him. Hall didn't react. He didn't like the fact that he was approaching him. They end up getting to kind of a scuffle. And then later on, Jarron Reed goes over to him and says, hey, it's an emotional game. I love you. And then Hall said, that he loved him too. And they asked Hall about it after the game. And he was like, hey, this is the leader of our team. And he was holding me accountable. And that's kind of, I think that everybody, when you see that, what was everybody talking about on social media, or at least a huge chunk of them? They were saying, hey, look how dysfunctional the Seattle Seahawks are. They got players pushing each other. They can't even get themselves straight. But it's like, no, you want that. You want guys who are going to hold others accountable, your team leaders, when they're not living up to the standard. And Jarron Reed learned that from Nick Saban. And, he has carried that to the NFL. It's one of the big reasons why Alabama players have always been so highly sought after, because they're going to be coached right, and they've got the right mentality. You're not going to be on the field, when Nick Saban was the head coach, if you were going to be a head case and arguing with people and doing all kinds of things that you weren't supposed to. And so you could at least take the discipline aspect out of it for the most part when they've been coached by Saban.
That's a great point, man. And, and I hope that doesn't change, because Saban's not there anymore, And so I that worries me about just where we are right now with things, I loved hearing that Tyler Booker was kind of the guy this week who was, acting as, hey, you know what? We're going out and we're going to do it the right way, and kind of, and I know it was the other coaches that mentioned that, but it shows that somebody that's been there and understands it and loves being at Alabama could have gone anywhere. He could have gone anywhere. I mean, he's a first-round draft pick. And when we do the All-American report, Mike Johnson says every week, the guy's great. Like, watches him on film, watches the offensive line. He decided to stick it out, and I'm glad that he did. And, he's lived up to that this year. And I guess, if you're struggling, if you're Milroe, it's hard to be the leader when you're the one throwing all these interceptions and not playing your best. And, Malachi Moore, you're out there. And we like Malachi. I'm not picking on him like I don't like him. I do like him. But, when you act like he did at the Vanderbilt game, it's hard to go into somebody else and say, hey, this is how we do it, when you don't do it that way. So I was kind of glad to see Booker as that guy that stepped up. I don't know where this season, this could be a 4-loss season. Just telling you that right now. They lose to Vanderbilt. I mean, they lose to LSU next game, and I'm scared to death right now about DeBoer and his staff having Alabama ready for the Iron Bowl. I'm going to tell you that right now. This is my honest. I'm telling you guys that they don't have anything to lose. And sometimes with these guys, I just don't know. I mean, I see the Vanderbilt game, and I'm like, and I see some of that second half of that Georgia game, and I see the end of the South Carolina game, and then parts of the Tennessee game, and you feel like that there's reeling going on, and it doesn't stop. So I'm worried about it.
Well, I mean, and I'm I'm not saying that you shouldn't be, but what I will say is that you're starting to see some of the things get corrected, right? I mean, you hear about Tyler Booker. You don't see that necessarily, but I will say the product on the field was, a little bit more disciplined. And here's the thing. It started off rough still. Like, it wasn't like they were flawless and they came out ready to play from the jump. But what you started seeing is in real time, guys started overcoming some of these issues. You saw, Jamarian Latham, he ends up making a play behind the line of scrimmage. You see Malachi Moore slapping his helmet, getting him all hyped up, trying to help him up. I mean, like, these are things where it's like guys are starting to have a little bit more fun again. I mean, I saw, and I have a huge respect for Crane and Company. Jake Crane, I think he does a phenomenal job. But I did see, because someone in our comments on one of our videos let us know that he had made mention that he felt like it was the celebrating on the sidelines after the 4th down stop on the goal line, that it felt very fake. And, I will, and he admitted, he could be wrong on that. And I will say, being down there on the sidelines, it felt quite the opposite. I think he's really trying to get this team to have fun playing the game. And I think guys wanted to go out there because there was pride. And as long as there's pride, you've got hope. And that's the bottom line, because pride will overcome a lot. You will get some things right because you're too prideful to continue to fail. And, I saw guys having fun. The starters, the depth guys. I mean, it felt very authentic to me. And it does look different than it did under Nick Saban. Nick Saban wouldn't have been jumping around all crazy like Kane Womack was and celebrating with his guys. That's just not how Nick Saban operated, but Kirby Smart does. It felt very Kirby Smart to me.
Right.
So I don't know. I didn't agree with that. Totally respect him, respect his take. But I actually, just being down there, I thought that you're seeing signs of moving in the right direction. And that's why my panic, it's like, with so much talent, as long as they're moving in the right direction, I have hope. The problem is you got LSU next. That's by far your biggest hurdle left on the schedule. There will be some other tough tests. I mean, you got to go to Norman, you got to play Auburn. But I do think that if they can get through this LSU game and they could come out of the bye week prepared and more healthy, I do really think this team's got a good chance.
Adam, appreciate the super chat. Clint, he's not a fan of the senior class, talking about some of the players that are seniors. And, we appreciate the money and also the support. But what do you think about his opinion? Do you think that Malachi can control his emotions and Booker is a loudmouth, which I don't think he's a loudmouth?
I think Malachi didn't control his emotions. That doesn't mean that he can't. This isn't an every week problem. It wasn't like Alabama just struggled against Vanderbilt. So where was it against South Carolina? Where was it against Tennessee when you lost? If he can't control them, then he wouldn't have controlled them in those situations either. I think it was a bad look, and I criticized the guy for it. Said he should have been punished. Also made mention that it was, him being punished however they saw fit. But I don't know that I agree with that. I think there are limitations with like a Jalen Milroe. I think there are limitations with a Malachi Moore. But I also think they're great players. I think they're great people, and they're trying really hard. They really care about Alabama. Jalen Milroe loves the University of Alabama. Malachi Moore, in-state guy. No one's questioning him. Tyler Booker loves Alabama more than any player, or as much as any player that has ever played at Alabama. I can assure you he has such a respect. But I mean, there's been adversity, and it is a new wave. It's a new era of player. And I think coaches are trying to learn how to deal with some of this stuff. I think players, with the way that they've a lot of these guys were always kind of coddled on the high school level, but then they got to the college level and it was like a reality check, because once you sign that, on the dotted line, letter of intent, you were locked in. You ain't going nowhere unless you want to sit, and no one wants to sit for a year. So, you weren't coddled. It was like a very harsh cutoff. Some guys didn't respond well, others did. But now you kind of have to coddle guys on the college level too. And that's different. I mean, so this mentality that they have in high school, that continues on to the next level. Then the NFL is kind of dealing with it, because you got guys demanding money all the time and willing to sit out, not play. So, I mean, it's really all levels at this point to a degree. But for college, it's new, because guys are more so locked in, or they used to be locked in. They no longer are.
Look, Caleb, I'll tell you right now, my personal opinion is I just haven't, even with that 34-0 win, I thought Missouri was a terrible football team. I wasn't that impressed with the way Alabama played the first half of that game. I thought the Tennessee game plan wasn't good enough. I felt like South Carolina, they were blowing it at the end of the game. The Vanderbilt game was not good enough. When you can't stop a Vanderbilt team to the tune of 12 of 16 on third downs. Bama was 2 of 9 on third downs. I am worried. Okay, I'm just telling you guys, it's not good enough. What we're seeing right now is not improving, in my opinion, from one week to the next. That's my opinion, and I want to see it improve. That's why I gave DeBoer and his staff a C and not a B. I never gave a Nick Saban staff a C when we would grade him. So let's just give you that idea right now. Do I like the guy? Yeah, I want him to do well. But don't look at that. In my opinion, Clint, don't look at the 34-0 win and go, okay, we're back. I saw that in one of the comments. We're not back. They stink. Drew Pine's the worst quarterback that we played this year. The guy couldn't throw. He couldn't throw the ball. He was bad at Notre Dame, and he's even worse now. That's how I feel.
Well, I will say, when you are playing teams like this is a top 25 team. They were 6-1, but they were without so many guys. They had a top 25 SEC defense going against that offense, but they were playing on the road. Their defense was Alabama's offense was playing at home. But when you face the limitations like they did, where you've got a second string quarterback that is like every time he throws the football, he's throwing it to you. You've got backup running backs, a starting receiver out, all these different things, then you have to show you're not. I don't think we can take a ton away from it other than when Nick Saban teams or Kirby Smart teams find themselves in those situations, they do what needs to be done. They don't I've seen backups come in and they end up playing really well and the games end up being close. I mean, you look at Texas A&M, they got to win with their backup. Now, their backup, I'm not saying Drew Pine's this guy. I mean, it's night and day different. But what I am saying is you still have to go out there and get the job done. And Alabama played as flawlessly as you can play, pretty much, given their circumstances. So, I think that on that side of the football, it's tough to take anything away from it. But the offense, that's the side I'm more encouraged about because there wasn't a whole lot of injuries with Missouri's defense. And they've been a pretty good unit. You saw some struggles, especially in the first half. You're not wrong. But when you start figuring things out and you can get your run game going, I mean, that was a pretty good run defense. I think number 30 in the country.
Yeah, that was a big positive, man.
Yeah, so
I love the way he ran the ball. Finally.
Yeah, and what I'm encouraged when you see that, and it's like, okay, sometimes you just need to see it happen. The lights start to turn on for you, and you're like, man, you know what? Justice Haynes looked like a completely different player when we rode him a little bit. Mm-hmm. When we kind of let him get into some rhythm, so get some momentum going. Maybe we should do that more. It's like when one thing before this game last year, I thought Tommy Rees did a phenomenal job of really kind of retooling the offense. You saw them start to use Kendrick Law in some different ways and against LSU. You saw Jalen Milroe start to do some different things. They were playing to his strengths even more. They took the opportunity before the LSU game to really get some things right. I saw them in the second half already moving in that direction. That makes me encouraged. I also agree with you, though. You can't look at the Missouri game and say everything's right in the world. Alabama's back to being Alabama. That is not the way to approach this. I'm saying I'm encouraged by what I've seen, and I'm hoping that continues and they continue to build on that. But we won't know until they step on the field in Baton Rouge against a very good LSU team.
I mean, look, I've been on here in these YouTube channels for 4 years. I've been covering Alabama for 20-some years. I love it when I see that, that switch, where I'm watching the way that they're playing and feeling very confident about what's coming. I saw Alabama at Tennessee, which should have been up 21 points or 17 points at the half, up 7, and I knew they were going to lose. And these games are tough, man. I mean, this isn't like this is a really, really tough job because everybody has you as their biggest rival. I mean, you go, Ole Miss tell you, Alabama, Mississippi State, LSU, Tennessee, Auburn, everybody, because you're Alabama, and you're taking everyone's best shot But the biggest disappointment, and I see there's this big debate over Milroe, and why people criticize him and why they don't criticize him. The reason that he's criticized is the same reason that when Jake Coker comes in here and does Elephant in the Room, he got criticized. The same reason that Tua got criticized, the same reason that Jalen Hurts got benched, right, and criticized. It's because you're the starting quarterback at Alabama. And what I feel bad about for him, and maybe it's one of the reasons why I have taken up for him a little bit, is that this offensive line was supposed to be the anchor of the team, and they're not that good. They're just not. I mean, watching Pritchett whiff on blocks, and those blocks that he misses mean that Milroe's getting a block. He's getting a helmet in the back. Those are like Tom Brady couldn't get away from those. I mean, it's the offensive line to me, Clint, they're the biggest disappointment. I mean, would I grade them out? Probably a C, maybe a C minus. And I thought they were going to be not road graders. I just thought they were going to come in and block and be dominant, and they're not.
Well, what I'll say about Milroe first, I think it's the fact, and it's the same thing we're doing to DeBoer, right? You're comparing him to the greatest college football coach of all time. The biggest problem that Jalen Milroe dealt with becoming Alabama's starting quarterback, and someone had to do it, is he followed 3 first-round draft picks at the position, including top 5 picks and the number 15 overall pick in Mac Jones and Jalen Hurts,
right,
who, while he finished at Oklahoma and had his own problems while he was at Alabama early in his career, he still ended up going to the second round. He's still going to Super Bowls. He's got problems on the NFL level too. I mean, I think I thought he played a lot better yesterday, but he's still working through some things as well. I mean, it's ups and downs for him. It's a ever, evolving process as far as quarterback development. You guys have ups and downs, but what I will say is, I think when a guy has some weaknesses, and Jalen Milroe clearly has some weaknesses, I think most quarterbacks do. Otherwise, they'd all be first-round draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
As a coach or as a coaching staff, you've got to figure out ways to work around that. Now, other people will say, well, we think, someone on the bench is better, so just switch them out to where you don't have to worry about that. Well, I think that Ty, I love Ty. I think he's one of the best backups in college football. And if he became the starter, I would feel very confident in Alabama's chances of continuing to win games. I mean, it would kind of be, to me, like Mac Jones coming in for Tua Tagovailoa. How many teams mid-season lose a top 5 pick and still almost make the college football playoffs with their backup? I think Alabama would be in really good shape. But just because you haven't seen him and you don't exactly know what those weaknesses are, he's got them too. Because if he was this world beater that was just way better than Jalen Milroe, I mean, way better, he'd be the starter because everybody on the team would see it and they would support, hey, if Jalen was the problem and there was a better solution, they'd be looking to make changes. And that's not just the coaching staff, but I understand your problem with the offensive line too. I don't think that they're set up, and I've said this over and over, for some of the situations. Like, you can't have the penalties putting you in second and long, third and long. You can't, you can't have the negative plays that Alabama's had. You can't be, ineffective as far as running the football between the tackles. I just started to see improvement on that. I'm really encouraged, and I'm hoping Jaden Roberts, we talked about it yesterday, I'm really hoping that he continues to get closer to 100% through this bye week, because if he can, I really do believe between, the players that they have, I think Pritchett is still a work in progress. I think he's better as a run blocker than in pure pass protecting situations. But I think Caden Proctor, I understand he gave up a sack, but he has been so much better this year, guys. He really has. Technique's better. He's playing with more confidence. Just, as this bye week continues, we'll see where the health of this group is at. And if Jaden Roberts can get closer to 100% with the way that they played on Saturday, I think that they can start moving the football more consistently on the ground. And I think they could play a lot off of that.
Mm-hmm. I hope so, because this LSU game is a playoff game. This is like what college football was like before the playoff, right? Every game matters, but because both teams have lost twice, now this game's like, hey, you want to have that playoff game. And if Alabama loses, and essentially we're out of the college football playoff picture with 12 teams, I mean, what does that tell us about where things are, And this one, they're a flawed team. Obviously, their quarterback throws a lot of interceptions. They seem to catch some breaks from the officials and that's a whole nother topic. I guess we can get into it right now. The officiating stinks, man. And it stinks for everybody. And that's like becoming a big topic, not just for Alabama fans, but just for college football fans in general. And it's getting to the point, Clint, where even people like me that know, like, man, I work in sports, we can always blame the officials. I hate doing that. But then you go back and you watch some of this mess and it's like, man, not good to me.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's bad across the board. Someone that writes for Nebraska shared like a 5-minute video of just terrible calls from the Nebraska-Ohio State game. When I say 5 minutes, I mean, it's a little bit under 5 minutes. So, I mean, it's a problem that everybody's dealing with. This isn't specific to Alabama. I think Alabama's caught some bad breaks on some of this stuff. There's some of the more egregious stuff that it's like, man, I mean, how does this keep happening to Alabama? But, no one's out to get Alabama, I don't think. I'm not going to go that far and think it's anything like that, but it has been a problem. But I think if you start letting things like that, we can talk about it as fans. This is a show where we talk about things, we discuss things, so we'll certainly continue to talk about it as long as it's terrible. I just hope the players don't buy into any of this. They don't listen to it. They don't worry about it. I hope the coaching staff doesn't, because that's an external excuse. You can't control it.
Right.
Figure out a way to get a job done. Don't be sitting around waiting for the rest to screw you. That's a very poor way to go about it. But I mean, I understand your point, and that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, I would say, I don't think you would find one person in the chat right now that would say that they feel like officiating's doing a good job consistently right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to deal with it. I mean, like when some of the plays, we talked about it on the post-game show, the just two awful ones. The one where they didn't call the whistle, the punt that hits the guy and they can't tell that it hit the guy. And then they're calling weird penalties based off of like what happens when it's a live ball and it's not a live ball. And then I was listening to the next round and they were talking about how the cameras are like, I guess, student cameras operators in some of these games instead of like professionals and stuff. And then they use those same camera shots to like, I get, that's the gist I got of it. I don't know if that's true or not, but how can they get it right in the NFL and they can't get it right in college? Well, you say, well, maybe college doesn't have the same money as the NFL, but the SEC has that kind of money. I mean, look, the SEC, go look at the TV package that they just signed. You know what? They may have to take some of the money out of their pockets that they're putting in for other stuff and put it into officiating, but it's got to get better, man. I mean, it's got to get better.
I mean, I've seen some pretty terrible NFL officiating too. I mean, some stuff where, the big thing used to be, and I mean, we haven't had one of these debacles, I guess, in a couple of years at least, but what is a catch? I mean, that was a huge problem. What was it? The Rams and the Saints, that pass interference, no call is one of the worst officiating blunders I've ever personally seen. So, I mean, I think it happens at every level, but I think that the conversation we're having with Chris about it yesterday, I think is a big one, because I do think a lot more money needs to be going towards that. These guys, part-time, I feel like it's too important to the game to really have guys who are not full-time referees. And I feel like we should be able to address that. Yeah.
And that's how I feel. Maybe you just, instead of having the whole group of them, you have like some guys that, that are full-time, that are working with some of the better ones that are the weekend warriors. But there's just so much money wrapped up in this now. And if we can sit at home and watch and all of us can agree, how are they not getting it right? But it is frustrating, and it feels like with some of these games that it's determined based on these calls. And I'm not saying this is related to Alabama. Now, that Alabama-Tennessee game, not this year, but the one in Tennessee the last time, you're never going to convince me that something bad wasn't going on with that officiating crew. You just won't, That's just my opinion. I thought that officiating was awful. I thought that it was so bad that it really made me question any of this stuff.
Well, I got a question for you. This is a little bit more off topic, but if it's something that I was thinking about, and I'm I want to take it to the people, the subscribers on the board too, and get their take on it. But right now, during this bye week, if you had to pick one thing that was guaranteed fixed, one element, what would you fix coming out? Now, that doesn't mean that would be the only thing that gets fixed, but what's the one that's like, if I could pick anything, and it's like, snap your fingers, it is now no longer a problem, what would it be? And you could say why.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you guys a second to answer that, because I love that question. I am going to read this one from Norman. Thanks for the new super chat. Chill out a bit. Come on, Norman. What do you mean, man? I'm a worrier, man. You guys know that. And I smell that Auburn game coming at the end of the year, and I want these guys to get this right. But I hope Clint's right and I'm wrong. I do. Clint, I hope you're right and I'm wrong. Really. Thanks for the chat, Norman.
I will say, I feel like people in the chat right now, it might not even be 50-50.
No, you've got the people behind you.
Oh, see, I was about to say, I feel like maybe it's just Adam's carrying some weight here, man. I mean, he's throwing out a lot of comments. He's not happy. He's not in a good headspace. I understand it. But he's not the only one though. But I will say, a lot of people feel like Norman. A lot of people feel like Adam. So they're on both sides of this. And I think what I like about this show with you is that I think sometimes I get too rainbows and sunshines, and I think you're sometimes you can get a little too gloomy, and I think us together we can pull it together and kind of find a nice little middle ground. I mean, there are still concerns though, but so O-line has been one. Penalties,
well that's because of my DeBoer and Shula days. Those are from my college days at Alabama. If I would have just jumped on the fan base, I mean, as a fan during Saban, I wouldn't know what life could be like when you lose to Auburn every year, when you lose to LSU every year. It stinks. Losing to Tennessee every year, no fun, and it happens fast. So anyway, yeah, I hope I'm wrong. All right, look, yeah, here we go. I'm going to run through these. Change one thing about the team. Penalties, man, right at the top of the list. The penalties have, and that was a Saban thing too over the discipline, right? And I saw somebody else put on here discipline. Bob, you're kind of in that same boat. I would say this, the offensive line. Jay says offensive line. I think the offensive line has to get better. And hopefully being healthy will help them get better, like you said.
Well, and I think this needs to be like a realistic question. If someone were to say, I make Jalen Milroe the best passer in college football, I mean, okay, let's, if you wanted to say improve passing game, which some people have, that's fine, but I want it to be somewhat realistic. And I think we should probably also separate, because I do feel like the number one thing, if you could pick anything, would just be the discipline, whether it be, some of this stuff as far as decisions, as far as personal fouls, or if it's just, less penalties, fewer penalties. I think that would fix a lot.
Yeah.
Because you start going back through some of this stuff, and it's like, okay, if you say run game, okay, well, where does the run game come from? Do we think that it's really a Justice Haynes, Jam Miller problem? Probably not. Okay, so what is the problem? More than likely, it's the offensive line. Maybe you can make an argument that if Jalen was more of a threat on some of the other stuff, that maybe that would take some pressure off the run game, open some things up. So maybe that's your choice. Maybe it's the offensive line. But then you start going further, and it's like, okay, what's the problem with the offensive line? Well, I don't think they're being put in enough. They're not positioning themselves, really the offense in general, to be in favorable situations. You got two tackles that are just, their strengths are not being, drop back pass protectors, and they're asked to do, 45 dropbacks against, or it was more than that. I think it's 49 dropbacks against Tennessee. Are you really playing to your tackle strengths, especially when the game was not out of hand? You were always in it or in the lead, or it's, penalties. But see, this is where you start to dive a little bit further. It's like, okay, well, penalties are putting them in a lot of these situations. Cut out the penalties, whether it be special teams penalties, whether it be offensive penalties. So really, I think there's a number of different directions you could go, but I just wanted to get some people's answer, because I do think that they're going to highlight some of their biggest weaknesses during this bye week, and they're going to figure out ways to work around it or get it better. And it won't just be one or two, they'll try to do that with a lot of things. But I think their biggest, they'll really try to put an emphasis on. It's just a matter of if they can get some of this stuff fixed.
What do you think about Coach DeBoer being part of the discipline issue? I mean, do you think his style is going to work here, or do you think that it's not going to work? I asked him when I interviewed him, I said, do people mistake kindness for weakness? And, he was like, no, I hope not. I feel like he'd be the type of coach I could play for, because I personally wouldn't want somebody screaming at me. I'm just going to tell you that. That's never worked for me. I'm more of a, let's go watch it on film, figure it out. You explain to me how I've messed it up. And I would put enough on myself to go back and fix it. Right. And when I make mistakes, it bothers me probably more than anybody. I don't want to be the person that lets everybody down. There's other people that I've been on teams with that are hard-headed. And that they need to be yelled at, like, unless they're getting yelled at, they won't do what you ask them to do. Right. But everybody has a different formula that helps them succeed.
But this is one of the things, and we don't talk about this enough. Nick Saban was such a student of learning how to influence people. There are different personality types. What you just said is 1,000% true. If you think Nick Saban could go break one off in Rolando McClain and get the most out of him, that's not how Rolando operated. He would have. I'm not kidding. I don't know, but I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Nick Saban would have been trying to publicly go postal on him and stuff, that Rolando wouldn't have swung on him. I mean, he was completely different than other guys. You can slap AJ McCarron on the ass in front of the entire world, and he had a different personality type.
Didn't he yell at somebody else, and basically he eventually told them the reason he kept yelling at him was he was really yelling at McClain?
He was yelling. He did that a lot. He would be screaming at someone else because he didn't feel like he could scream at them. And I mean, you don't want that type of personality. Like, you don't want to challenge them and then them step to you, because then you could end up having a big problem, especially when it's like, I mean, you'd have had to kick Rolando off the team. I mean, like, right. So my point is that he took the time in the offseason stuff, and Bill Belichick did this too, where he understood the different personality types. He knew how to influence certain guys, whether it be, how to discipline. You got to discipline them in a certain way. You got to motivate them in a certain way. And so, it's not really a one size fits all. And I think some coaches do not understand that. I don't know if I'm hoping Kalen DeBoer understands that, because I think for a lot of personalities, he is what you want. Not really for all of them, though. So that's why I say you got to have the guy who's going to break one off to complement what you do. And I think Jamarcus Shepard's got a lot of that. I think he's a big part of that as far as the offense is concerned, especially being down there on the field. Mm-hmm. And it's more, he's obviously 98% focused on the receivers. But, I think that as far as, being able to discipline guys in a little bit of a different way, I think a strength and conditioning coach, Scott Cochran, kind of the way he did things, would kind of, players freaking loved it, man. I mean, they really did. But at the same time, he'd get on you too. And I think Saban at times had too much of that. But then you have like the Lane Kiffin. Like, look at Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban. Why do you think they work so well? Couldn't be more polar opposite personalities. But I think that kind of the ruggedness in which Nick Saban would handle situations compared to like the free, I'm not happy, but I'm also not going to be really screaming at anybody. I just think that was a different feel, and you capture that with certain coaching staffs.
Yeah, I love this comment here. We got this. Going to beat LSU, smoke Mercer, shut down the Sooners, make Hugh Freeze lose his job after the Iron Bowl. I would love that. Like, that would be a dream come true. And then beat Georgia again in the playoff. I hope we play Tennessee in the playoff. I know we're better than them. I mean, we beat Georgia, but I and all their fans and all the crap that they talk, they are the big, like, they've won 2 of the last 18, and yet they made up for it with those 2 wins with all their crap talking, man. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I told everybody when they were in the middle, I would go on radio interviews and stuff. This was probably around, 13, 14, 15 in a row in. And every time I would tell people when because people weren't really viewing it as a rivalry. They were saying, because it goes one direction as far as, all the wins and losses. I told people, if you want to know just how much of a rivalry it is, wait until the second Tennessee finally beats Alabama and some of that trash talking and everything starts flowing in the other direction, where there's some bragging rights going in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. And you'll find out exactly how much of a rivalry it is. 2 out of the last 3, their fan base, you would have thought they were running 16 out of 18. Just with the way that they've been behaving. And they've gotten real cocky about the whole Dixieland Delight thing. Winning 2 of the last 3, they're willing to bring up that a lot. I mean, me personally, it's like, I mean, I think Alabama just straight up took that from you because they felt like they could, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, I will say that the entire rivalry factor of things, it's the college football playoff is going to present some opportunities where you can get some get back. You know, you ain't got to wait, you know, a full 365 days to get back at somebody. You might get a chance to get them again.
Yeah, let's hope so. I see a lot of the conversation talking about, you know, the difference between Saban and DeBoer. That's not my point, Bama Red. I'm just saying, like, the bottom line is this, is that we're in a transition year. We can't ignore the fact that we had the greatest coach of all time. You know, I mean, we just can't. I mean, that's part of what's going on this season. That's part of what the reason that we have to talk about it so much is that's kind of the story of what 2024 is.
How do you not? I mean, honestly, how do you avoid having that conversation? When you start talking about player discipline things, it's like people are going to approach that through a lens of, okay, we didn't see this under Saban, or maybe we did. We started to see some of these signs under Saban, not the discipline thing necessarily, but as far as discipline with penalties and stuff, it's like, okay, because everybody wants to put Nick Saban on a pedestal, rightfully so. He earned that freaking spot, but you know, they want to put him up there and act like there was no flaws throughout his entire time at Alabama. And it's like, okay, well, if you're criticizing penalties, you need to be criticizing how it looked under Nick Saban too. When you're criticizing playing down to your opponent, okay, you need to criticize Nick Saban on that a little bit too, because he started to fall off in some of those areas as well. I just think it's where college football is at now. It's nothing Nick Saban did wrong. It's nothing where he got complacent. It's just he always did a phenomenal job of adjusting, and I think he was doing that. But there was just a lot that he had to overcome on that front. It's the same problems that Kalen DeBoer is dealing with. But I mean, when the guy's been your coach for 17 years and everything's been done a certain way and things look different, if a guy goes from wearing, you know, polos on the sidelines to t-shirts, people are going to take notice to that. When you go from not playing music at practice to playing music at practice, people are going to take notice to that. So I mean, I just don't know how you have some of these conversations, because, you know, like you see that from Malachi Moore, and it's like, I mean, it's you know, Malachi's parents, I guarantee you he was raised better. You know, under Nick Saban's a coach. He's a father figure. I know you were raised better, you know, so you shouldn't be doing that. So you start wondering why. So I don't think, I mean, when it's directly following a guy, you're going to get the comparisons. And I mean, Nick Saban dealt with that early in his career a lot to Bear Bryant when he really got things going, and that had been freaking decades. So
yeah. Now, how cool is it that we had Bear Bryant and Nick Saban? Like, it's incredible, isn't it?
I mean, and that's, you know what, Alabama won the lottery twice. That's what scares me the most. Is that most programs have never won the lottery and will never win the lottery when it comes to coaches. Alabama didn't just win it once; they won it twice, and so now I'm like, crap. You know, what are the chances that you win it 3 times? Because that's what we're all hoping for now. Yeah. But I will say, I mean, with where those 2 coaches positioned Alabama's tradition, Alabama does have a chance to eventually find themselves, whether it be Kalen DeBoer or somebody else, to eventually find themselves having, you know, one of, if not the best coaches in college football. I just think that's where the program's at. You're never going to get rid of that.
Well, that's kind of where we are right now going into this off week. Kind of a spirited discussion. You know, we didn't have the press conference. You know, they did it last off week, and then I guess it
was on the schedule, but it Monday morning quarterback. So I'm thinking what happened is that they didn't stream it. So, you know, that's something that I did not see coming, to be quite honest with you. But at the same time, we are going to be getting players later this week, be able to talk about what they said, and we'll be back tomorrow talking about, you know, any of the quotes and stuff that happened from the press conference today.
So anything else you want to get into on the show? I mean, any other questions that you guys have? Just kind of before we wrap things up here.
I mean, I will say, just from my standpoint, and this has been kind of the theme of this entire conversation, is just where's the program heading? You know, do we not feel good about where it's heading? Do we feel good based off of what happened against Missouri? How much can you really take away from it? I think what Missouri at the very least showed us is that there's not quit in this bunch. Just with the way that things have been going, and including in the Missouri game. Like they didn't come out playing well. It was more of what you had seen in the previous, half against Georgia, 3.5 games. And instead of letting that continue to spiral, letting that, I think they're really trying to get things right. And I think from my standpoint, that makes me pretty encouraged.
Okay. Well, to me, I look at it and I go, we're right on the cusp. I mean, it's, and a 34-0 win's a win, man. It's a great win. So I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm just saying, you know what? It's time to accelerate right past this into this LSU game and take care of business. And over the years, we've had a lot of success down there. And that goes long. That goes all the way back to Bear Bryant, right? I mean, Bear Bryant started it, and it wasn't until DeBoers that we lost Baton Rouge. And think about that, and then Saban was the guy that beat us, that ended our dominance there. But we've done really well there. It's going to be have they said the game time yet? Is it going to be a night game?
It just got announced probably about 10 minutes ago. It is a 6:30 kickoff, so it's going to be. There were some kind of rumors going around about 11 a.m. And as soon as I was like, that's not, I can tell you that is not happening. LSU won't let that fly. The TV networks won't let that fly. And the fact that they are, the fact that they are playing for a playoff spot. I mean, and that's not guaranteed for either team. You still got to win out once you're done with this game. But I mean, one thing, the loser, I'm going to tell you right now, is not going to the college football playoff. So, this is going to be a fun game. We're going to be reflecting this week a lot on Alabama. Why the snap count observations. I did, some post-game observations. We're also going to be looking at some recruiting stuff, and I hope people are excited for this show. We're going to be doing it later this week, but we're going to dive into this recruiting class and just where things stand, how, applying it to, the roster for the future, how certain guys are going to fit in. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. And then, probably late this week, we'll really go ahead and start turning the attention towards LSU. And then all of next week, it's going to be just like that Georgia game where it's just, all the matchups, everything. We're going to be diving into every angle possible, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I've got Coker coming over for the elephant in the room. He's just messaged me. He's on his way here now. So
I'll be curious to hear some of his thoughts on this, and tell him if Alabama gets a win over LSU, we will get you guys a new intro. How about that?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Like the intros are so good now, and then ours comes on, and it's like it's just like
tell him if Alabama can get a win over LSU, though. That will be the last time you have to see that intro.
Oh, he hates it. I think it's so funny. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us and talking Alabama football. Spirited debate today. Roll Tide to all you guys. And thank you. And if you guys want to meet Coker, we're going to be at the Floor Bama the Friday before the LSU game for our show, the Bama Tailgate Show. So it would be like 1 to 4 o'clock. We'll be down there. We've had great audiences wherever we've gone with the Tailgate Show, Clint. So you should come down too, man.
It's a traveling bunch. And I will say I'm not going to Baton Rouge, so I will be free. I might have to do that because I feel like you're an influential person. I feel like I can be easily influenced, and I'm worried that you're going to get me into some trouble down there.
That could be. I'm not. Don't put it past me. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Make sure that you take advantage of the mybookie.ag code next round. That'll double your initial deposit. So you feel comfortable about Bama. I'm curious to see what that line's going to be by the time we get close to that game. Mybookie.ag. But you got the World Series, which is the World Series. We've won it for a long time. Yankees and Dodgers. You also have NHL, NBA going, the NFL. How about the Hail Mary yesterday? Unbelievable. There's a guy one of the guys on the Bears is like taunting the other team or something, and he's not in position, and they end up losing because of a Hail Mary. I mean, good God. Can you imagine if you had bet that game?
I get
that'd be a bad beat, wouldn't it?
That guy's walking home if he was on my team. I would be absolutely lit, because not only is it embarrassing that you lost, now everybody on the planet is happy that you lost
That's
because
right.
of what that guy did. I mean, if you're not a Bears fan, you wanted Washington to win this, or you were happy that they won the second that guy, caught that touchdown. But that's why you never automatically assume that the W's coming.
Yeah, no doubt, man. But great to see all you guys in the comments section. Be part of covercrimson.com. And if you do it right now, you get the Cover Crimson t-shirt with the annual subscription. So we appreciate all of you guys. You got to get on now to get the original badge that goes next to your name in the comment section. And as we build this up, and it's in the middle of being redesigned, you're going to want to check that out. Clint and I will be on later this week. We're going to do our first recruiting show, and there's a lot going on in the world of recruiting. I've been covering it for a long time. Clint has as well. Bama's got the #1 class. They had a couple of flips recently. Some of the guys that they have coming in have just put up amazing seasons their senior year, and whether they're 5 stars or 4 stars, but it really is a fantastic class. And this class represents the style of player, but also the personality that probably will work good with Kalen DeBoer. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing right now. He's still getting elite talent, but he's also getting guys that kind of match his personality.
Well, and what I'm excited to talk about is just there are so many elements to both what Kane Womack does and what Kalen DeBoer does, or what they want to do, that these recruits bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And so just I was looking at the offense, and I've been looking at the defense too, but the offense I was a little bit more public about and posted some stuff. But just, I mean, I love the talent of this class and the elements that they can bring both to your offense and your defense. And I'm excited to talk about that with you. We're going to be diving into all of it. I think people are going to have a really good understanding of this current cycle, this current recruiting class, and kind of where things are trending for Alabama, if they can maintain and hang on to all these guys. I know that's a concern for everybody, but nothing seems to indicate that they're in any danger of losing anyone. So, and they're still in the mix for some pretty high quality guys too.
Mm-hmm. Final comment. I got to say this story, Kent, a Snake Stabler story from the Pink Pony Pub. Yeah, we haven't done, I don't know that the Pink Pony Pub's big enough for our show just because there's not a lot of room in there. But when you go into the Floribama, the snake seat's still there. When you go up to that upper, the upper area into that one spot, that's where he was all the time, man. Loved Snake.
Hey, first thing we haven't been in a few years because of my job now. It's difficult, but family trip down to Gulf Shores every single summer. And the first thing we do, my dad's not really a beach guy. He's really not. Like I'm pretty sure the only time I ever saw my dad step on a beach, he was still in his tennis shoes and socks, and he was coming down there to bring my mom the walkie-talkie because she forgot it up in the room. He's not a beach guy. Like he loves the beach, but he doesn't like actually going out on the sand and stuff. But the first thing we do when we would get to Tuscaloosa is we'd stop at the Pink Pony Pub, and that was a must. And then we go to the grocery store, go and get some groceries, do all that stuff, and then that Floribama. One trip to the Pink Pony, and then the rest of the week it was Floribama every other night for old Pappy. He's a big Floribama guy too.
Hey, you need to bring him with us.
You talking about being a bad influence?
Man, can you imagine that?
No, I can't. I really can't, because he'd get us both in trouble. He likes having a good time. He really does. He's the life of the party.
Hopefully Ryan Anderson will be there as well, man. He's such a good dude. So anyway, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Roll Tide, everybody, and look for Elephant in the Room later today because we're about to record that here coming up. So thanks for hanging, and we'll talk to y'all again soon.